Dear students, today we are discussing planning regarding the disaster management. Planning in the sense preparedness. How we can prepare for encountering a disaster. As we know, we cannot avoid a disaster as it has caused by natural reasons. So what we can do is that to prepare it, to handle it effectively. So type of planning, if you see, physical planning, planning of cities in urban areas, advocacy of planning, policy and proposals. Physical planning, we can put certain regulations and certain laws for making construction. Likewise, advocacy of planning is policy and proposal by government. It's a broad spectrum view. Planning in disaster management. It is to anticipate future disaster preparedness. They include national development. Many countries, including India, gear national development to a series of time period plans, for example 5-year plans. This approach of incorporating disaster mitigation planning into the developmental planning process has been found to be cost effective and result oriented. If a country realizes they have certain weakness in certain areas, a certain geographical area is more prone to get certain natural calamities, so they were allocating certain funds and insisting a few volunteers for handling such kind of events. So these are a national level preparedness from the side of the government in order to mitigate the effects of disaster. So the national development, as far concerning our 5-year plans and all those tools, we can include these disaster management views inside it, allocate funds and arrange manpower, trade manpower in order to encounter disaster situations. While considering about prevention, we are planning in order to prevent something occur. Our prevention is to safeguard people and their belongings. Construction of flood control structures. While considering the prevention aspects, while constructing bridges and buildings, we should consider the fact that this region, the speciality of this region, whatever the possible constraints that can occur because of disaster, even if it is flood or earthquake or something like that. So the construction of flood control structure or construction in order to bridge the issues related to earthquake, avalanche, landslide, these all we can include in this aspect. Controlled burning in forest areas prior to a high risk season in order to prevent big fire. If you know about a certain area is prone to get forest fire, what we need to do is controlled fire. What is controlled fire? We should be instigating fire there. We are preparing a certain area to get fire. So before that we will avoid animals and certain species from that area. We will clear it and we will make it isolated from others and we will instigate fire. So controlled fire will be a good option in order to prevent big fires, big uncontrolled fires. Planning for the different contingencies, for example complex and costly flood preparation, complex and costly flood prevention system could reasonably be expected to come within the category of national development. Planning for the different contingencies, for example, complex and costly flood prevention system. See, we realized however, we are getting flood in certain areas, and it is happening from decades. In order to encounter it, we need to have a sophisticated plan. For a detailed plan, for a detailed intervention of such plan, implementation of such plan, we need a huge amount of money. So the costly preparedness is there to encounter it. Next, mitigation. The term mitigation or prevention mitigation is taken as mainly including structural and non-structural measures designed to reduce the effects of disaster. However, as we discussed earlier, disaster will happen. We cannot prevent disaster from happening. It will happen. We can reduce the repercussions or the reflections of disaster that can possibly affect to the mankind or their belongings. That's the only thing we can do. For instance, aspects such as building codes, land use regulations and safety codes for transport system would fit more appropriately into a program or regulation category. As we know recently, we having certain notifications inside of government after our flood affected in Kerala, orange alert, red alert, all those things we are getting periodically. By these alerts, they were giving information you should not use night rides through hilly areas because there is chance to get landslide because of heavy rain. So the regulations from side of the government should be given to the citizen in order to mitigate the effects of disaster. We cannot avoid disaster, but we can safeguard ourselves and our belongings by realizing its importance and its possible hazards. For example, the fact that wind-resistant factories had been built into domestic houses would have some bearing on disaster response management decisions leading to possible evacuation or temporary movement to safe havens. So it's always according to the situation where we are living. If we are prone to get flood, we are prone to get landslide, or we are prone to get earthquake or tsunami, whatever it is. According to that, according to the situation, we should prepare. Preparedness and response. The combined categories of preparedness and response generally constitute widely used basis of encounter disaster plans, especially those which might be called action plans. The combination of these all things, preparedness and response, that is what is known as action plans. Preparedness and action plan, if we are comparing these two aspects, we can say that action plan. This is because so much of the effectiveness of response depends on good preparedness. In some cases, the preparedness and response plan may be called a national or state disaster response plan, as distinct from separate plans designed to deal with recovery. See, a country is continuously facing such kind of disasters, and there should be a need for a law from the side of the state to encounter it. That's very necessary, because one of their major problem is related to this. Consequently, they were facing such kind of issues. Frequently, they were facing such kind of disasters, and they were getting big loss because of that. So the preparedness should be from state level. Allocation of resources and allocation of fund and human resource should be there to encounter such kind of situations. This is because so much of the effectiveness of response depends on good preparedness. As we had about several happenings, several strikes of tsunami in Japan, but very few had about the deaths. The people, those who are affected would be their belongings will be huge, but Loss of life is very less while comparing with Indian scenario because of their preparedness. They know what will happen next because of the changes that can take place in the atmosphere. They will realize their technology is that much advanced to realize what is going to happen next. So they will prepare for that. Recovery. There should be two plans in hand. They are disaster response plan and disaster recovery plan. First one is disaster response. How we will respond to disaster. If a disaster is happening, how we will respond. Second one, recovery plan. First of all, we should evacuate from the place and we should make everyone safe. Second one, after the disaster, we need to recover. We need to attain our normal position, rehabilitate, both physically and socially, economically, in all aspects. The planning process usually involves consideration of a wide range of disaster-related matters in order to decide what is eventually included in the plan. The planning process usually involves consideration of wide range of disaster-related matters in order to decide what is eventually included in the plan. So, what we need? Disaster response or disaster recovery plan? It should be decided by a planning process. Wide range of disaster related matters should be analyzed before we are taking recovery aspects. In this case of response, or we need disaster recovery plan. How we can respond to it, how we can recover from it. It should be well directed by the state. The state itself should take a decisive step in order to solve this issue, because individually we cannot do it. It needs more machinery, it needs more money, and it needs more preparedness. So the state can only do it. State and something like international arena authorities can only do it. There are two types of planning. One is short term and long term. An effective approach to reducing risk and achieving disaster mitigation has long-term and short-term goals. The long-term and short-term is taking place because of the nature of the disaster and nature of the geography, or how the disaster is affecting to an area. Long-term goals are either an integral part of the national, regional, local disaster management plan, or are set after a major disaster with the view that should a similar disaster strike again, the population will be well prepared and able to cope with it. So there should be a long-term plan. As we know, its reflection should affect more and more time. If you realize that it will happen again and again, then what we should do? We should have a long-term plans, long-term goals we need. Long-term planning therefore involves measures of prevention, mitigation and rehabilitation, both three aspects. We need to prevent it if possible. Mitigation, that should be there. We should reduce its effect, that is what is known as mitigation. And rehabilitation, we need to rehabilitate, we need to attain our normal status. What we can do is there to arrange safe areas for these people, treat their physical issues, social and mental, economical, all those issues should be treated, and we need to rehabilitate them. In short-term planning, on the other hand, consists of measures to deal with disaster situation immediately at hand. If a disaster situation is happening, what we can do immediately? What we can do immediately? If an unexpected cloud burst is happening, a flood is happening unexpectedly, or landslide is happening unexpectedly, what we can do? These things are coming under short-term planning. These measures may be initiated either immediately after a disaster strikes or precluding a disaster situation, proactive, to prevent and in order to handle it safely. So the short-term and long-term planning. Short-term planning will be applicable to an area that has not much more issues happened in the past, Long-term planning should be in certain areas. There should be a series of such issues were happened. Such episodes were reported several times, so they need to prepare for long term. But in short term, we don't have such history, but we were encountering such situation. What we will do? These all things should be clear. This is planning aspect. I hope you all go through this and learn it. Okay, thank you.